Okay, so the social cognitive perspective on personality. Very interesting thing about this is that, the psychoanalytic perspective focuses on the unconscious. Well, social cognitive perspective focuses on sort of this conscious, self-regulated behavior. It puts the person back into the driver's seat and says, you know what, you are responsible for your behavior, not the unconscious, not your instincts, not, these biological drives, nothing like that. What is truly important here is you. It is your sense of self, and how you behave in a particular situation. And so the very interesting thing about this particular area of psychology and in this area of personality theory is that it is very, very heavily reliant upon experimental findings. This is in lab testing. You guys might remember Albert Bandura from the experiments with the Bobo doll, and essentially this idea of imitation, and that we tend to observe other people's behavior. We imitate that behavior based on what we're experiencing and what context we're in, what situation we're in. And so Albert Bandura had this idea of something called reciprocal determinism. Now, reciprocal determinism is quite an interesting sort of topic here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this kind of on the side here. And so he believed in this idea of, and so I'm drawing a sort of a very odd triangle here, and I apologize for that. And so what he believed was this sort of three-tiered approach here. Okay, so we have the behavioral. So we've got this on, we'll call this on this end of the pyramid here. Okay, we've got the cognitive components, which we'll put on the other end. Okay, and then we have, I'm going to get in the way of the slide here, but essentially the environmental. Okay. And so, sorry, that's kind of difficult to see there. So in essence, what this is, these three major components here. And so, let's move this over here a little bit. Okay. And so the idea with reciprocal determinism is that our behavior and our personality is influenced by the interaction of these three things: the behavioral component, the cognitive component, and the environmental component. So in essence, our behavior directly influences what environment we put ourselves in. Our environment can then influence our thoughts, our cognitions about something. And our cognitions about something directly influences our behaviors. And we can actually see this move the other way. Our behaviors can affect our cognitions. Our cognitions can affect us in terms of what environment we put ourselves in. And the environment can affect how we behave. So think of it this way. Let's say, you are in a situation where you go to a hospital and you're visiting a sick person. Let's say your cognitions are that you absolutely hate hospitals and you refuse to go into hospitals. Well, maybe it stops there. Your behavior is going to be reflected by your thoughts, and you're not going to place yourself in an environment that is a hospital because you go, no, I'm not even going to go there because I hate hospitals. Let's say you tolerate hospitals. And so your thought is, okay, well, I can go into the hospital, I'll visit my sick friend, but I need to make sure I don't touch anything because I don't want, to get germs. And so that might restrict how much you touch doors. And then maybe you touch a door, but then you have the cognition, oh my goodness, now I'm going to get sick because, because I'm in this particular environment, I've touched germs, now I need to go to the bathroom and wash my hands. And so all of these things affect each other, okay? All of this will affect what you do, what you say, what you think, and where you go, and what environment you put yourself in. And so this idea is that we're all directed by our self systems. And our self system essentially guides how we perceive things, how we evaluate things, and then how we control our behavior in different situations, or what we refer to as contexts. So you behave differently in a funeral than you do in a movie theater, than you do at a rock concert or a musical concert. You behave differently at a rock concert than you would at a classical musical concert. And so all of these things are dependent upon the situation, the context. And so our self-system guides us to evaluate that and see, how do I act in this particular situation? And so what we also find is part of this, what makes up this self-system, is our self-efficacy, which is basically the belief that we have about our ability to meet specific demands of a situation. So self-efficacy can be seen as very, very simple as knowing how to tie your shoes. You know, when you're really, really young, you try to learn how to tie your shoes. And so if you feel like you can't do it, then you have really low self-efficacy that you can tie your shoes. Now, if your parents encourage you and say, no, let's try this. You can do this. This is really, you've got this. Then what they're doing is they're building your confidence and they're building your self-efficacy. And eventually you learn how to tie your shoes and you meet that confidence. Self-efficacy can be in any situation. How prepared you feel. How skilled you feel, in a particular situation. And so, that self-efficacy is essentially built in as you get older. And so what's interesting is when we look at some of these differences, we can actually see some differences in Freud versus Bandura on aggression and this idea of personality development. So Freud actually believed that, aggression was universal. It was an unconscious human instinct, and it's controlled by your internal restraints, which essentially is your superego, and external restraints, which is culture, society, and morality. Now, remember, Bandura said, no. This is not an unconscious thing. This is not an instinctual thing. He said, no, aggression and really any behavior is driven by conscious goals and motives. So it's not impulses. It's not unrestrained aggressive impulses. So he would say, for example, that those people who during World War II were part of the Nazis that made the decision to turn people in or to harm people, he said, no. Those were deliberate decisions. They were carefully reasoned choices. And these were things that people did because they felt pressure. They felt that they had to. This was not impulsive. This was not unconscious. This was something that people actually did. And Bandura was a big proponent of saying with social cognitive theory that your personality, does not dictate who you are, that you are in the driver's seat, and that you can, of course, that you can actually dictate your own behavior given the context that you're in. And so when we look at some of the strengths of social cognitive theory, what we see, of course, is that it's very well grounded in empirical work and laboratory research. And it had a really big impact on the study of personality. And then the idea of self-regulation places the responsibility back on the person and says you're in the driver's seat. Now, of course, there are limitations. One is that, even though there's a lot of laboratory experience, it doesn't mean laboratory work. It doesn't necessarily mean that, that represents the complexity of human behavior. And so a lot of these lab experiences, these lab work, very simple work done, and we might be oversimplified. Also, it completely downplays the unconscious emotions and conflicts that are important elements of personality and behavior. So these, of course, are things that are downplayed in this particular type of area of psychology. So I'm going to go ahead and end the video, and we're going to pick back up on trait perspective just to keep these nice and short.